U.S. Representatives Bill Flores, a Republican of Texas, and Peter Welch, a Democrat of Vermont, have introduced the Food and Fuel Consumer Protection Act of 2019. And that bill seeks to limit ethanol blending to 9.7% of the total volume of gasoline projected to be sold in the coming year. So, as most people should know, the United States government requires refiners to blend gasoline with ethanol to a certain degree, and this bill wants to limit that to 9.7%. So the EPA earlier proposed to increase that threshold to 15% every year, which was criticized by the refining industry and, of course, appreciated by the farmers and ethanol producers. And so why this 9.7%, someone might ask? So the bill explicitly talks about what's called the ethanol blend wall of 10%. And that is supposed to be a threshold beyond which regular cars could be damaged by the fuel because ethanol has a more corrosive nature compared to gasoline without blended ethanol in it. And so that is considered the ethanol blend wall. So they want to make sure that this doesn't happen. And I think this is actually not that good an argument against this, because the main reason why ethanol is accepted as this alternative fuel is that it's supposedly carbon neutral. So, you build a bunch of crop plants and then you ferment them into ethanol. And so when you burn that ethanol, the same amount of CO2 is emitted as was sucked in by the plants when they grew. And so this has some challenges because you have much more input than just the crop plants into that. You have fertilizers and pesticides and so on, technology. So you might end up with more CO2 emissions than just the tailpipe emissions. But that's sort of the political reason or the general reason given for the ethanol as an alternative fuel. But the political importance of this is, of course, the corn-ethanol agricultural interests in America. And that is, favoritism, similar to something like, the production tax credit for wind turbines and so on. And that should be opposed on economic grounds and freedom grounds. And so the corrosion issue itself might have merits. I don't know enough about this yet to make a good judgment whether 10% is actually the correct blend wall. But it leaves out all of the, really good arguments, which is, cost, economic scalability, and economic freedom, of course, of the individual to choose the right fuel for their car. And on the other hand, if we could make climate change from fossil fuel emission, from CO2 emissions, would be a real threat. And, ethanol would just make the cars a little bit more expensive, but would save the world. That wouldn't be relevant, right? So from that perspective, it's not a really good argument. But the bill is sort of a half measure, and it essentially says that, oh yeah, at 9.7%, we're good. That's okay. So 9%, so almost 10% of ethanol forced into the gasoline by government mandate, that's okay. Beyond that, it's not okay, but below that, that's great. So I don't find this a very convincing argument. So it's sort of giving up the moral high ground and, fighting a losing fight.
Now, isn't part of the justification of ethanol that some amount of it helps prevent engine knock?
I've read that argument. I'm not sure that it is necessary for that, and I'm not sure that's the cheapest alternative.
Yeah, I'm not sure also what percentage of it. It's just this kind of thing where it's just very problematic that you have specific people saying, "Oh, this exact percentage is the right percentage that we should mandate it," versus, why are you doing that at all? I mean, if it's to stop engine knock, then obviously consumers are going to want that. And then if it's, if it makes things cheaper, then that's a benefit, but it's just such a politicized issue, in part because of it's just connections to a lot of perceived, at least, farm votes. Although I remember when I was in in Iowa for the Republican caucus it was in 2015, maybe it was in early 2016, but I think it was in 2015. And Ted Cruz was speaking there, and he said just very straightforwardly, I'm against ethanol subsidies. And he got a really good reception. I mean, there's something just as straightforward and honest about it that people responded to. So maybe that's a model for some people.